Hi, listeners. It's hard to believe, but New Frontiers in Functional Medicine has been going strong since 2015. With over 200 episodes and over 2 million listens, we are growing every year. My goal is to continue to bring you the best minds in functional medicine, epigenetics, and longevity. I want the content to be actionable for the functional medicine clinician and interesting for the rest of us. Thank you for supporting this podcast with your likes, with your honest reviews, with sharing the episodes with your friends and family. And if you haven't done so, please consider leaving a like or leaving us an honest review wherever you've accessed this podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you to our sponsors. Because of our sponsors, these are companies that I trust, that we vet carefully, that we use in clinical practice, that I use personally. Because of them, everything associated with this podcast is free. If you haven't done so, I suggest you head over to DrKF to the podcast page where you can access the full transcript for every single one of these 200 episodes. And along with that transcript, you'll get an episode summary. You can get the research citations and additional content that is pertinent to the episode. I myself return to the transcript page all the time to pull out a little snippet of information that I want to recall or access a citation. Or better yet, sign up for our newsletter, again, at drkarafitzgerald.com, and every single podcast episode will drop in your email as soon as it's released. Thanks again. Thank you to our Diamond Level sponsors, Biotics Research, Rupa Health, and Integrative Therapeutics. For over 40 years, the foundation of biotics research has been innovation and quality. Their goals remain unchanged: innovative ideas, carefully researched concepts, and product development with advanced analytical and manufacturing techniques. Biotics nutritional products are of superior quality and effectiveness. They're available exclusively to healthcare providers. Find them at bioticsresearch.com. I also want to give a shout out to our friends over at Rupa Health. They make lab testing easy, fabulous, doable for you, the clinician, and for you, the patient. Consider using Rupa as your super, super, super smart solution to all things laboratory testing. Visit them at rupahealth.com. For over 35 years, patients and clinicians have trusted Integrative Therapeutics for their dedication to quality, potency, and accuracy, and for bringing us exclusive products backed by science. From sourcing of premium raw materials to their meticulous manufacturing processes, they prioritize consistency, efficacy, and safety because our patients deserve nothing less. Find them at integrativepro.com. That's integrativepro.com. Thanks to our gold sponsors, Timeline, Mira, and OneSkin. Timeline, fueling cellular energy for a lifetime of healthy aging. Find them at timelinenutrition.com. Mira, the most trusted hormone monitor. Find them at miracare.com. And OneSkin, skin age reversal technology. Find them at oneskin.co. Welcome to New Frontiers in Functional Medicine, where we are interviewing the best minds in functional medicine. And of course, today is no exception. If you're with me on YouTube, you can see I am sitting next to the brilliant Dr. Heather Sandison. I want to tell you about her. She's become a great friend of mine, and you'll quickly see why as we launch into this conversation. But let me give you her background, and then we'll just tuck right into some of the amazing work she's doing. Dr. Sandison is a distinguished naturopathic physician. She's devoted her career to providing compassionate care and innovative solutions to those affected by dementia. Renowned for her pioneering work, Dr. Sandison has integrated groundbreaking, holistic, and multimodal interventions, seamlessly creating clinical, residential, research, and educational platforms. Her relentless dedication has not only transformed the lives of patients and caregivers, she's also set new standards in the field of dementia care. Dr. Sandison, welcome to New Frontiers.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So first of all, how did you get, I mean, it's extraordinary, folks. She is the founder of the first residential care facility for older individuals, people primarily suffering from dementia. I mean, she's just already carved out and done extraordinary work in this field, but Heather's also published some amazing research and she's releasing a book. So I want to understand how you got into focusing your work on dementia, and then incredibly enough, actually opening, I think you have 2 treatment facilities now. So give me your background and, bring us current, and then we'll talk about your extraordinary study and book.
Thanks. Yeah. So I went to naturopathic school, and on the end of that, I thought, okay, autism and Alzheimer's, there's these 2 things that you really can't treat. I don't see them getting significantly better. I'd been told in training that to suggest that someone with Alzheimer's could improve would be to give them false hope. So don't do that. That would cause more harm than good. And I heard that over and over again, that refrain around these brain diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, especially at the end of life, but also at the beginning of life, where it was just this black box of mystery and suffering. And then I was at a conference and I heard my mentor, Dr. Bredesen, speak, and he basically said the opposite. He was like, no, with dementia, with Alzheimer's, you can get reversal of the disease process and you can see symptomatic improvement, which is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is what patients care about. This is the difference between independence and dignity, and just being siloed into a senior living facility, a memory care unit, and not knowing the names of your grandchildren. And so this was shocking to me. I didn't believe it, but the way that Dr. Bredesen described it, the systematic approach to essentially applying functional medicine, naturopathic medicine to neurodegenerative processes, it made conceptual sense to me, even though I was a skeptic. I didn't believe it. But I went to his training anyways because it made sense. And I was like, okay, well, if I can treat someone with dementia, then I can kind of do everything else. Everything else is a cakewalk. Great. So then I was on his list in 2017 when his book, The End of Alzheimer's, came out. And there were people who read his book, found his book, and then came into my office. And what I saw next totally surprised me. I remember my first patient who had severe Alzheimer's who got better. I share her story in the book. I just was in tears. I couldn't stop crying because seeing someone with such severe dementia improve their quality of life, go from single word answers, yes or no, to having complete conversations in full sentences, going from basically having to stay at home, completely dependent on her husband for every single activity of daily living, to ballroom dancing with him 3 times a week. Both of them had this radical shift in their quality of life over 6 weeks. And when I saw that this was possible for
Wow.
this couple, and she had a MoCA of 2. So a MoCA is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and a perfect score is 30. A normal score is 26 and above. She had a MoCA of 2. And just 6 weeks later, after applying Dr. Bredesen's approach, she had a MoCA of 7. And so that shift, this was a measurable shift, and it was a meaningful shift in their quality of life. And when I saw that, it was like kind of first disbelief, and then how do I do anything else with my life but basically tell as many people who will listen that this is possible. And then the best thing about her story was that she wasn't alone. I kept seeing this over and over and over. And then Marama, the residential care facility, was really born out of people asking, I want this Bredesen approach for my loved one, and I'm working and I've got kids and I have so much else going on. I can't do it. I can't drop everything and do this for my mom or my dad. Where can I send them? And I realized there wasn't a place with this vision of returning memory impaired patients to independent living. And so I thought, well, this is possible. How hard can it be? And we had a facility 9 months later, and now we have a sister facility in Kansas. And in Kansas, we haven't published this. Well, we will probably try, but we have to get retrospective IRB approval. But the first 5 residents have been there for more than 6 months now, and 4 of them improved their MoCA scores, which is consistent with what we measured in the research and also what Dr. Bredesen's group. Most people get better. More than half have an improvement in their measurable cognitive function.
That's extraordinary. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I can see how you were, the turn of events in your career as it unfolded. You would absolutely put this in, how could you say no to this? And I'm so glad that you kind of had the courage to follow it and to be, lit up by this extraordinary work of Bredesen and take it on yourself. So this first patient who brought you to tears, I mean, what were her, I'm sort of cutting to the chase, but I know everybody's thinking about it. What were her, we're talking mostly to clinicians now. What were her fundamental imbalances?
Yeah, so she had a mouth full of mercury and gingivitis. She had a ton of dental work that needed to be done. She did that in those first 6 weeks. She was postmenopausal, as most people who suffer with dementia are, and they were excited to get started on bioidentical hormone replacement. She was nutrient deplete, and they were living in a moldy bedroom. So they moved out of that moldy bedroom. They actually moved into the living room. And she had not been exercising. They had been going for walks, but she wasn't really getting that cognitive engagement at the same time that she was getting physical engagement. We refer to that as dual task exercise. And so they started ballroom dancing, which they really enjoyed. She got on a ketogenic diet. She was a little hyperglycemic. So she was going in the direction of diabetes. She didn't have diagnosed diabetes, but she had higher levels of glucose. And so we got her on the ketogenic diet. We see that's often very helpful for cognition. So we systematically went through the list. And that first time I saw her, because this was between our first and second visit, so I didn't even have labs on her yet. So maybe I had some previous ones because I knew the glucose piece. We knew to get her into ketosis and give her a little bit of support there. So she probably had minimal labs from her primary care provider, but we hadn't done her heavy metal testing. We hadn't even done mycotoxin testing. This was all based on what they were telling me. And she was able to get started. Her husband had way more confidence than I did, but they dove in fully and she got the benefits of it.
That's extraordinary. Was her decline pretty swift and sudden, or what was her
She had been
movement
suffering
into
for
dementia?
years. Yeah, she had decline for years. Yeah.
And what were you, it's amazing that he felt really empowered and confident in it. And where did you ultimately see her MoCA kind of peak at? Did it continue to increase over your work together?
Slightly, not significantly. It did continue that's typically what we see. So like in the first 3 months, we often will see, not every time, but we'll often see improvement even in those first 3 months, which is mostly getting the lifestyle pieces going. And then 6 months, it's often improved more, sometimes 12 months, even more. There's definitely a connection between how much people are engaging in the whole protocol, in the lifestyle, in the supplements, in the medications, and all of it. And then sometimes we see drops. I mean, these patients there's so many variables. And certainly for her, there were financial constraints. And so they backed off of supplements at one point and she slid backwards. And I didn't see them as often anymore. And she kind of slid backwards, but everyone's different. And I haven't seen anyone go from a MoCA of 2 to a MoCA of 30. My confidence is highest in that MoCA of 17, 18 and higher. Those, we will see them go back up to 30. And so I really encourage people. I think so many people are afraid to see their neurologist, afraid to talk to their doctor about cognitive decline. And so they try to hide it, they cope. And really that's when we want them engaging with a Bredesen trained provider where they can do all the testing, they can change their lifestyle, they have the agency to do that. And we're not trying to repair structural and really big structural changes in the brain. I think when we're in that biochemical, where we're changing the energetics by getting into ketosis, we're getting more oxygen to the brain, treating sleep apnea. When we're in that kind of energetic intervention stage, we have so much more confidence. We see bigger deltas in terms of MoCA scores, better improvements, and more sustained improvement.
Right. So, this should just be a part. I think you're focused on dementia now exclusively, but obviously we should be bringing this investigation into our practice much earlier. Like when do we start? When do we actually start?
So Dr. Bredesen refers to it as a cognoscopy, right? So 45, we know that dementia, by the time you have symptoms, so dementia is the umbrella term, which includes frontotemporal dementia, of course, Alzheimer's, which is the most common. It includes vascular dementia, posterior cortical atrophy. There's lots of different variants of dementias, and Alzheimer's is one of those. But we really are talking about all of them because the neurodegenerative process, regardless of the ICD-10 code you put on it, there's a systematic way to understand what the causes of the neurodegeneration at the cellular level are. And really, Kara, what's fun is that I've got your book right here behind me, and it's like our protocols are not that different, right? It's about healthy aging, and that includes the brain. And there are some specific things about brain health, of course, and there's some specific genetics that we would want to look into. And if you have that genetic risk, the ApoE4 status, either one or two copies, and you want to be as a consumer much more proactive, and as a provider as well, encouraging people to be screened for genetic risk for dementia and Alzheimer's, and then also encouraging more of the lifestyle, the brain healthy lifestyle, and more of these interventions sooner. Dementia and Alzheimer's, the physiological changes of the brain are happening decades before you start to notice a symptom. And so we have many, many years to intervene from a prevention standpoint. And now we have much better testing in terms of the p-tau217 amyloid markers in the blood. These weren't even around when I developed the clinical trial. And so we weren't able to study these in our trial. They were still in the research phase in terms of the lab assays, but now these are available. And so we can look very specifically and diagnose Alzheimer's and see what direction we're going, not just based on the cognitive performance, but also on some biomarkers.
And just give me these biomarkers again.
Yeah, so the p-tau217 is one. This is essentially in the neurons, they have a structure. And when the structure starts to break down, you can measure p-tau in the blood. And then the amyloid markers are also something that you can now measure in blood. There's a couple different ones of those available. And this is available through LabCorp, Quest. And then imaging studies can also be very helpful. You can look at perfusion studies, and you can look at amyloid testing on imaging as well.
Were you able to incorporate this information in your book?
Some of it, yeah. It keeps changing.
I know.
So, yeah, it's exciting.
Okay.
In fact, in the book, we talk about some of the pharmaceuticals, and the last day that I could get the book back with any sort of edits, I think that day there was a news article that one aducanumab had been pulled from the market by Biogen. So there are these monoclonal antibody therapies that are out there and available. And one of them got pulled because it really doesn't work that well. It has high risk. Yeah.
And were you able to like pull that chunk from the book, or at least
we put a little asterisk, no longer available.
I remember going through the same thing, really trying to stay current. Nothing quite as extraordinary as that, but thank God you got that in before it went to, publication. You couldn't do anything. And the name of your book is?
Reversing Alzheimer's is the name of the book. It's the new toolkit to prevent and reverse cognitive decline, really at any stage. So I talk to entrepreneurs and attorneys and CPAs and professionals all the time. And part of the idea with this book is that anyone can pick it up and use it as a toolkit, as a guide to optimize cognitive function, whether you're looking for a cognitive edge or if you're looking to support someone with severe cognitive impairment. And also, of course, if you're in that area where it's kind of scary, you're starting to notice yourself that you can't remember where you put your keys more often, or you're not finding those words or those names that you used to. It's harder to calculate, or often an early sign is feeling overwhelmed. If you're somebody who used to have a dinner party every Thanksgiving for 25 people, and now the thought of doing that is just too overwhelming, that's one of those signs. Things that you used to do, travel, booking tickets, and making mistakes doing that, or feeling overwhelmed by that, can be one of those early signs. My brain isn't as sharp as it was.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. I can relate to some of those at the moment, but it's hard to say when there's so much going on. But yeah, indeed. I mean, it's the time for me to be doing some of these investigations. So folks, we're going to link on the show notes to her paper, to Heather's research, and to the book, of course. any other studies she mentions, or the testing. We can pop some links to the testing she's referencing from Quest and LabPro there as well, so you can go right to them. Let's talk about this, this pretty extraordinary study that you guys did, and you did it over at my alma mater, NUNM, at the HealthCat Institute, where we conducted our study as well. And I think, Ryan Bradley and his team are really doing a great job. So yeah, talk to us about your paper, what you guys looked at, what you found.
This episode is supported by Practice Better, a leading all-in-one practice management platform. Most health and wellness professionals love what they do, but feel overwhelmed with time-consuming administrative tasks. With Practice Better, you can automate tasks like onboarding, scheduling, charting, nutrition planning, and billing to help you better focus on the parts of your practice you love. New Frontiers listeners get 20% off the first 4 months of any paid plan at practicebetter.io with code KF20. Visit the podcast page on drkarafitzgerald.com for more information.
As we go deeper into the world of longevity science, I want to introduce you to a company rewriting the rules of skincare. Founded by 4 PhDs in skin science, OneSkin has developed a peptide scientifically proven to address cellular aging. By targeting senescent cells, their OS01 peptide helps skin look, feel, and behave younger, visibly reducing lines and wrinkles and improving skin's texture and overall appearance. To learn more about their groundbreaking approach, visit oneskin.co. That's ONESKIN.co.
Yeah. So I agree. They were phenomenal, have been phenomenal collaborators. Ryan is a good friend, and I had this wonderful opportunity where a philanthropist had a good experience and offered to help us. And a study, of course, we had patients coming in asking, if I do this, if I spend the time, the money, if I invest in this approach, how likely is it that my loved one will get better? And I didn't know the answer. And so when this philanthropist offered to help, I was like, this is the question I want to know the answer to. If these patients are investing in this, are they going to get better? Is it 50%? Is it 25%? Is it 80%? And so I was totally overwhelmed and went to Ryan and I was like, what do you think? He's like, oh yeah, easy. We got this. And so we collaborated with them and did that. I went through the IRB approval process. That took like 18 months. I was like, Ryan, is this still really easy? But he was like, yeah, this is normal. And then and then recruitment. Oh, I thought that was going to be a cakewalk, but we started recruiting in February of 2020, and then the world shut down in March. And so there were all kinds of wrenches, but we did it. So the study design was, we had 23 participants who completed a 6-month intervention. Our endpoints, our primary endpoints were MoCA scores, and then also we used the Cambridge Brain Sciences battery of cognitive testing. We looked at quality of life and sleep scores as well. And so over that 6-month intervention, we recruited people who had measurable cognitive impairment, MoCA scores of 12 to 23. And all these patients were seen here in San Diego at my office. So we basically were looking at what is the clinical course, like what happens when we see patients the way we would normally see patients, applying this Bredesen protocol, what happens after 6 months for people with measurable cognitive impairment. And what we saw was that 17 of the 23 improved after 6 months. So that's about 74%. And we had statistically significant improvements in overall composite cognition, in memory specifically, and in MoCA scores. And we had improvements in all of the other domains of cognition that we studied, but they were not statistically significant across the means of all participants. So essentially what we showed was that most of the time we're getting improvements, in significant improvements in cognition. We also saw improvements in quality of life and in sleep.
And to your earlier point, obviously, the earlier you catch it, the more likely you are to be able to achieve normality, which is greater than 26, I think, on the MoCA.
Yeah, exactly. And so this trial we published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in August of 2023. Now, a year previously, Dr. Bredesen and his team, the first author is Kat Toops, in July of 2022, they also published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, and they had 25 participants who had a 9-month intervention, and they took participants who were less severely declined. They were down to a 19 on the MoCA score. So not as severe and a longer intervention, and 84% of those participants improved.
Yeah, that's incredible. And they were using the same kind of structure that you employ?
I mean, so everybody's got a functional medicine, right?
Sure.
It's like everybody has their flavor of it and their style. And they had 3 sites in that trial. So there were 3 different doctors who recruited about 10 patients each. And so they each had a different style, but the majority of them got better. And all had been trained by Dr. Bredesen. They were using this functional medicine approach, a very systematic approach to measuring the different components, right? I think of toxicity, like when I think of Alzheimer's and how the way I frame it, the way I organize it in my brain, I'm looking for causal level issues, right? What's going to cause imbalance at a cellular level? Too much, too little, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then from there, it's going to be toxicity, it's nutrient imbalances, it's structural imbalances. And that might mean molecular structure like ApoE status. It might mean obstructive sleep apnea. It might mean vascular dementia, clogged arteries, or maybe it's pain. Chronic pain can also cause stress and contribute to dementia. So the way an orthopedist or a chiropractor might think about it, but also the way like a molecular geneticist might think about it. So toxins, nutrients, structure, stressors, and that might mean, again, too much or too little. Are you getting enough exercise? Are you sleep deprived? Are you too stressed out and bathed in cortisol all day that's becoming toxic to your brain? Or do you have enough purpose and meaning? Are you getting enough? Are you pushing against something? Or are you just watching TV all day and being passive so that you're not engaging your brain? So stress, really, it is about balance. And then infections. We know that COVID, the Lyme spirochete, herpes, and P. gingivalis that's associated. I mentioned that my first patient, she had gingivitis. So P. gingivalis can directly trigger inflammation in the brain. H. pylori, there's a lot of infections that have connections to direct connections to inflammation in the brain. And the gut microbiome, of course, plays a role there as well in nutrient absorption, so our nutrient repletion, but also then an infectious burden. And the last is signaling. So as we age, making sure that our vitamin D, our thyroid, and our hormones, sex hormones, stress hormones are all balanced so that we're getting the signals to the brain that promote the creation of new neurons and new connections between them. And when we systematically go through this process, which both Dr. Bredesen's team did and my team did, those are the outcomes we get.
That's
generally improvement.
Yes. It's a challenging, I mean, functional medicine in general can be challenging for our patients because it is complex. Everything is multifactorial. Treatment plans can be challenging and in some cases impossible. And we need to meet people where they're at and kind of negotiate and make that realistic. I'm assuming that some of this difficulty prompted you to open your inpatient setting, right? So that you could control those variables, that you could really get in there and be able to move the needle perhaps more efficiently.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So what I was seeing clinically was that most people got better, but the people who couldn't implement for whatever reason, financial constraints, they lost their driver's license, they couldn't get anywhere, they couldn't get the right food, they had a son who wanted to have happy hour every night, right? Like there's all kinds of crazy constraints that come up. You have
to have like broad enrollment. It's not just, the individual may not even be obviously that aware of what's happening. I mean, you really have to have this deep buy-in to engaging in this protocol. Yeah.
And that was part of the trial was set up as a feasibility trial, right? We didn't know what kind of outcomes we would get, but it was really like, can we do this with a cognitively declined population? Can we implement a functional medicine, a multimodal functional medicine intervention? And the answer was yes. Now, to be clear, nobody did everything. No one was perfect.
Are you able to tell? I mean, that's something that we looked at in our study, like how much adherence actually needs to take place. Do you have some ideas around that?
Yeah, so we sent everyone home with pill boxes and then we counted what pills were left. And, of course, then somebody would say, oh, well, I couldn't take them. I threw them away. And then they come back and their pill boxes were empty. And I was like, oh, I don't know how I think I shared that with you when I saw you at a conference. I was like, I don't know about this whole pill counting thing. But what we did check was ketone levels. So a mildly ketogenic diet was part of the protocol. And there were people who improved who never got into ketosis measurably. So, we weren't measuring, they weren't on a CGM or, we weren't measuring continuous ketones. So maybe they did at a time that we didn't check, but we got feedback. We certainly got feedback from their partners. We have the pill box counting, and we did have them to do kind of a journal kind of checkbox thing where they told us what they were engaging in and what they weren't. And it's such a good point that you have, like, is this possible to do, right? And I think that's part of the beauty of these multimodal interventions. It's kind of a choose your own adventure. Do the part that works for you. And, we might not get 100% reversal, but just doing what you're capable of should get us some improvement. And then maybe we can use that to build and
For
stack
momentum.
these interventions.
Yeah. I mean, especially obviously if, they and their loved ones are able to witness that, to actually see the change.
Yeah.
That's highly, highly motivating.
I mean, it's so fun. And just this January, I had a family and she's just so adored by she has 2 daughters and her husband, and they came in January and she started with a MoCA score of 8. So a single digit MoCA score about a year and a bit ago. And she now has a MoCA score of 15. And after, Christmas a year ago, she had been kind of despondent in the corner. And this is the woman who hosted holidays every year forever. And December 2023 versus 2022, the cousins were like, oh my gosh, your mom's back, like Auntie's back. And she was buying Christmas presents for the grandkids and engaged. And it was, I mean, I get chills just even talking about them. They're such a sweet family. The daughters are so supportive, and the husband, I tell people it's like watching a game of volleyball, because they're like, okay, you take her to the sleep study. All right, I'll make sure that I call and schedule it, and you can do Mondays, right? And it's just like this incredible collaboration to care for this absolutely adored woman. And there's been ups and downs. She ended up hospitalized with a GI bleed at one point on our journey together, and it hasn't all been unicorns and rainbows, but she is significantly better and people notice, and she's back.
And
she's
they did this outpatient. They weren't in your inpatient setting.
Yeah. And no one in the clinical trial, to be clear too, they were all patients in my clinic. So it's confusing because there's the community, the residential facility. We haven't done any clinical trials there. We haven't done any research there. We've done it all in an outpatient setting in a functional medicine practice.
Okay. But you're going to try to do the retrospective analysis looking at the Kansas group. It would be interesting to fold in the California group as well.
Yep.
So out of the buckets that you outline in the protocol you use, I mean, what are areas that pretty consistently light up?
In terms of imbalances and
yeah. So like not everybody has mold. Probably not everyone has a smoldering occult infection, or maybe they do in your experience. I'm actually really curious about that. But we know that most individuals, really in the world, I won't even, cite USA in this, are somewhere on the metabolic continuum. They're marching towards diabetes. And so that's got to be a bucket that you're seeing broadly. But anyway, what in your experience, what are the areas that really light
funny
up?
because it's actually the opposite. I think by the time people end up in a naturopathic clinic, in a functional medicine clinic, I haven't seen a ton of metabolic syndrome. I don't see a ton of diabetes. Now, in the clinical trial, there were, I'm not remembering exactly the number. It is in the paper. We refer to like the different buckets and how many people were in each of them. 23 out of 23 had toxicity. If you look for it in this population, they're older. And so there is some degree of toxicity, whether it's metals or molds or environmental pollutants. We found it in every single one.
And did a particular type of toxin or toxins light up more than others?
Not really. Yeah, kind of a mix. And there were certainly some people who had all of them, and some of them, I remember there was a gentleman who had very high levels of both mold and glyphosate, and they were the highest numbers I had ever tested.
Wow.
And so there were some people that had very, very high levels, but not all of them. All of them had some degree of toxicity.
That makes sense.
Obstructive sleep apnea is one where this is very conventional. And I also think it gets missed. It's been hard. There's a lot of resistance to doing an overnight sleep study in a clinical setting. And with COVID, there's been a lot of technology towards the at-home sleep studies that can rule in apnea. They can't rule it out, and they're not looking for other sleep disorders. But for sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, you can catch this on these at-home devices. And I think that will help us to prevent people from declining cognitively, because it's such a big part of hypoxia to the brain is going to trigger neurodegeneration. It's going to prevent you from doing the rinsing of the brain. The lymphatic system is active in deep sleep. And so if we miss that, we have accumulation of not just amyloid plaques, but everything that's triggering them.
Just going back to amyloid plaques, I mean, do you anticipate seeing some of these newly available labs improving? And are you using them in the research, or not in the research, in your clinic setting?
So they're cash pay right now, and it costs about $700 to do them. So it's, there's a part of our population that can afford that and wants to see them. They don't change my treatment plan. And so we're doing it really for kind of research purposes to say, what's the directionality here? My treatment plan is going to be changed based on the why, right? What's triggering neuroinflammation or neurodegeneration? And so I don't require that everyone get them, but I put them on all treatment plans. And if somebody can afford them, then we're happy to run them. It's pretty new. And so how it plays out, I'll be very curious to see. I hope that it helps to inform us, and certainly if we're talking to the Pacific Neuroscience Institute where Dr. Bredesen works, Dr. David Merrill is there and runs that institute, and we're talking about doing a randomized control trial. Dr. Bredesen's group has a 5-site randomized control trial that they're recruiting for right now. I think they're at the very end of recruiting. And so we'll do basically a follow-up to that. So we're putting that together right now. And we will absolutely be using the imaging and all of those markers in a trial.
Okay, that will be interesting to see long term. And that actually brings me to another question is, I think that between you and Bredesen's team, you've demonstrated that larger trials are needed.
Absolutely.
So are these, what are the numbers for these
He is recruiting
trials?
70 participants, and it's randomized controlled, and then they'll cross over so that the control group will cross over. And at the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, they're doing a prevention trial as well. So they're looking at people with mild cognitive impairment to see if they can prevent progression. So they have a trial going on right now. And so those two are happening, and we are working on a follow-up trial, another one, and we always are going to need more research. And I think one thing that is challenging is people are like, well, why don't you have these great big randomized controlled trials? This isn't going to be funded by a pharmaceutical company. There's not something you can get a patent on. This isn't a quick, simple, single molecule intervention. I really think it's time to reject the idea that will work. This is a complex disease process with multiple triggers, multiple whys, multiple reasons that neurodegeneration starts. And that's where we need to be focused. And that's not a one size fits all, Medicare covered. Hopefully it'll be Medicare covered, right? When they see the data and when we continue this work, I do hope that it becomes Medicare covered, but it's not a simple intervention. It's hard. And it's also not the type that a pharmaceutical company is going to put a bunch of money behind to take through phase 3 clinical trials. It's a precision-based, individualized approach, and it meets the complexity of the disease process, right? It's a complex intervention, but it's a complex disease.
That's very well stated. So, you guys will just continue to gather data, doing the best that you can. And, hopefully an investor, you'll have another philanthropist, somebody with deep pockets who can sort of see how to bring this forward into the world in a meaningful way will really kind of usher us into larger trials. But in the meantime, the work that you all are doing is really extraordinary. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited for you, for the book, for the publication. By the way, it's open source. It came out it's the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease again. It came out in 2023. Sandison is the lead author. Observed improvement in cognition during a personalized lifestyle intervention in people with cognitive decline. And Heather's book, Reversing Alzheimer's, is here. You can get it. You can grab it. It's great for the clinician, but I think it's also, it's accessible. You designed it for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It hopefully it's a companion, and adding each of these things is certainly a coaching component to it. Where do I start? It can feel overwhelming. And really what I'm most excited for is patience, right? That hopefully we can reduce the suffering and the burden of this disease.
I'm so excited for you. God, thanks for taking this on. Thanks for really making this your mission and bringing it forward in such a clear, elegant way, and for taking the time to do the science. It's intense running a clinical trial. It's a big deal, and writing a book, and here you are doing it. And starting an inpatient clinic. I just can't even imagine that one. The rest of the stuff I have some familiarity with, and it's a lot. But continue to rock the world, and we will certainly support you.
Thank you, Kara. It's such a privilege to be here.
As always, thank you for listening to New Frontiers in Functional Medicine, where our sponsors help bring the very best minds in functional medicine. And of course, today is no exception. Not everybody can be a sponsor on my platform. I appreciate the good work, the relentless research, and the generous support from my friends at Rupa Health, Biotics, Integrative Therapeutics, Timeline, Mira, and OneSkin. These are brands I know and trust and use in my clinic and can confidently recommend to you. Please visit them online and let them know you learned about them on New Frontiers. And if it's not too much to ask, consider leaving a thumbs up and a kind review wherever you're listening to New Frontiers. Thanks.